Wonderful to be here at this Tuesday discussion with Dr. Gesa Biermann, who will introduce Pine Earth for us. Pina Earth.
Pina Earth, yeah.
Pina Earth, but it has something to do with pine, so it has something to do with
a bit
with forests and carbon, and we'll hear about that. Gesa, Dr. Biermann, is actually from Munich originally. She doesn't sound like it. But she's been going back and forth between the Munich universities. She got her first degree, Bachelor in Communication and Business from LMU, then went to, and some of the certificate students are also doing that, she did her Master in Sustainable Resource Management, then she went back to LMU and got her PhD in LMU with a geography professor, with Henrike Rau, who many of you know. But even while she was doing her PhD, she was working at the CDTM.
Yeah, correct.
So there's a Center for Digital and Technology Management, and she was actually managing it. But the center consists of doctor students from all sorts of disciplines, and I think this has always been your strength, that you've worked with people from many different disciplines. In Pina Earth, you're working with foresters and business people, and you've always been interested in entrepreneurial stuff. And the great thing today is that we will have a chance to learn about Pina Earth and how this might work to bring down, to do something against climate change through forests. But at the same time, we can learn something from Gesa about how to start a business as an environmentalist. And I realized I know her somehow, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I know this name, I know it so well, but all of a sudden, we talked on the phone last week, and then I realized, we met before, because a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was reading all the dissertations for the Seelbach Umweltpreis, for the Environmental Award. And I think there were quite a lot from every Munich universities that, and she had submitted her dissertation for that award. But you know what? She won it. So I even had to do the laudatio, and my memory is strange, but I remember this, and I remember that I was totally impressed about your dissertation, because you read you were looking at 4 million users of chefkoch.de and hundreds of thousands of there were hundreds of thousands of interviews or empirical data, and it was all about finding out how people consume food. So collectively versus privately, publicly versus privately, men versus women, and whether they prepare it makes a difference. And I think people who prepare food at home, they are better consumers, they are more sustainable, and women eat less meat when they prepare the food themselves, things like that. I was totally fascinated. I read that dissertation, I think multiple, I remember it out of 10 dissertations that I read in that year. And so I was very happy. That could be a fun fact, but I always add a fun fact if I can. And I do have a fun fact about Gesa before we start, and that is, during the Corona time, she started to cut the hair of her colleagues in the office. And not enough. Since then, she cuts the hair of anybody who wants to do it. So that's her side job. With that, let me welcome Gesa. Join me in welcoming Dr. Biermann.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll sit over there.
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. I hope I can be loud enough for the back of the room, because I think I have to stay in the frame here. So otherwise I would stand up and try to incorporate everybody a little bit more in the talk. So please raise your hand, because I sometimes get a little bit quiet. So just in case that happens. I'm really happy to be here and really happy to see such a full room. And I can only imagine the different study disciplines that you might originally come from, maybe even different countries. So really excited to see such a diverse group of people here today. Starting off with a bit about myself, I think we've covered almost everything of this, maybe not so much about my free time, but as a startup founder, you have very limited free time. So I think what remains from that list is the book club, which we also have at Pina Earth still ongoing, which I really love. I'm a big book nerd, and I think it's a really great way to get educated on the side. Maybe one more thing about my CV. So it feels a bit like my previous lifetime. I co-founded and sold a fashion brand during my bachelor studies. And that was my first touch point with entrepreneurship. Back then, let's say I don't really like the word naive, but very kind of, I didn't really know a lot about entrepreneurship. Back then with my roommate, we decided in one semester break that we just wanted to try out this trend that seems to be going on, people just starting businesses. And we were kind of interested to see how far we could go. So we thought about what doesn't really require a lot of resources, is limited financial risk, and where do we know a little bit about something. We thought, okay, fashion seems accessible, and we just decided to start printing shirts and bags and hats. Some of them might have the print YOLO on them, which, it was 2012, 14, so that was fair back then. And we did that for a while, but then I think both realized we didn't want to continue in fashion all of our life. We had both started to go more into the direction of sustainability. As Christoph already mentioned, for me, that was the SRM master's program at Technical University of Munich. For her, it was consumer science, so also with a sustainability branch. And so we decided to try to sell the company, which surprisingly worked. And that was sort of the first experience. And I think from then on, I got a little bit hooked just to see how far you can get with your own skills and when people will stop you, which surprisingly doesn't happen that fast. So I'm still on that journey now in a different setup with Pina Earth, much more focused on environmental topics where I feel very much at home. And that's what I'll be telling you about today. So first, a little bit about the startup itself, why we decided to found the company, and then rolling back in time, how did we get to where we are today? I'll try to go through these slides somewhat fast so we can spend more time on the discussion and the interactive part. So happy for you to try to remember all the questions that come up now for the latter part of the presentation. All right, starting off with Pina Earth. Some background, let's see if this video plays. So what you would have seen here is a video of the region called Harz in Germany, which I don't know if for all of you it rings a bell, but this is the region that has also been more present in the media because of forest death. So quite a dramatic picture to see. I think you can get an idea of what's happening there, and to put that into numbers a bit more. So in the past 5 years, since 2018, we've lost 500,000 hectares of forest. If you don't really have a gut feeling for what a hectare is, so this translates to about the size of the state of Saarland in Germany, or 5% of the entire forest area that we have. So a very significant portion of forest that has already fallen risk due to climate death, basically, not due to human intervention directly, so no one went in and clear cut the forest or anything like that, just due to increased drought, heat, storms, bark beetles, so a different type of pest infestation. And the projection on this is unfortunately not very positive. So 4 out of 5 trees in Germany are ill. What does this mean? It basically means their immune system isn't working as well as it should be. So they're increasingly fallen victim to these increased threats. So now we could basically wait this out and then replant all the forests once they've died. But this, if we zoom out, is socially very, very huge cost, and we can't really carry that as a society. So for Pina Earth, we thought, can't we do anything, preventive to try to sort of make the forest that we have future-proof? And that's why we're focused on something that we call forest adaptation or ecosystem restoration, where we're transforming monoculture forests to a biodiverse mixed forest. And now I think this doesn't maybe seem like a revolutionary idea, because just as in so many other aspects of life and business, diversity just provides so many benefits. Sometimes if I'm talking to somebody with a business background, I like to compare it to a portfolio of financial assets, where you also wouldn't invest, just in one type of asset class. That's a really risky strategy. And that's basically, if you look on the left side here, what happened in this specific forest. So in Germany, we mostly have either almost 100% spruce or almost 100% pine forests, because they were over-optimized for timber production. And this is not just privately owned forest, but also state-owned forest, because they basically had the mission to provide Germany with timber. They fulfilled that to a certain degree, but went a bit far into one direction, focused on this one lens of economic prosperity. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to rebalance. So basically get the forest on the left-hand side more into a mixed forest that you can see here on the right-hand side. And what I specifically love about this image, so it's a picture we took at one of our forest areas where we have a project going on, is that you can see that both realities are actually possible in the same place at the same time. It's rather a choice. So it's not even a vision we're selling. We're just trying to get something that already works more into more areas in Germany. So that's what we call forest adaptation. So now the problem here is that you do need quite a significant investment to move the forest from the left to the right-hand side. And forestry is not really a business model where you have a huge margin. So they don't necessarily have a lot of cash on reserve that they can just take and now invest into this project. So that's why we need a new business model that basically gets forest owners into, incentivizes them to do this, but also provides them with a new revenue stream to actually make this happen. And now that's where the voluntary carbon market comes into play. Now, really quickly, how does this work? So basically, companies emit CO2. I think this is not really a surprise to anybody here. They, even if they reduce, will most likely still have a remaining unavoidable set of emissions. And the idea is to purchase carbon credits. So that is the instrument. 1 ton of carbon has a certain value. That is expressed in euros. And with this money, you reinvest in projects that either draw down carbon from the atmosphere, which is called carbon removal, or they avoid additional carbon being brought into the atmosphere, which is called a carbon avoidance credit. Now, really important to mention here is that investing in these carbon projects is not a replacement for reduction efforts. So decarbonization efforts still need to come first. But they are a great measure if you have unavoidable emissions where you basically can't do anything else. And there are really interesting studies that actually show that companies who do use the instrument of carbon credits, so invest in these projects, decarbonize twice as fast as companies who don't. Which makes a lot of sense to me intuitively because it's basically extra money they're spending on sustainability strategy where no regulation right now is forcing them to do this. So nothing really is, that's also why it's called voluntary. Nothing is forcing them to do this except for self-commitments like setting a net zero goal, for example, under the Science Based Targets Initiative. Now, just one more note on this. The voluntary carbon market is separate from the compliance market. I'm not going to get too deep into the details, but basically one, for example, the EU ETS is regulated by the government, and you have a fictitious amount of credits there, which has nothing to do with real life projects. So these are not connected to any kind of forest or peatland or other kind of carbon project. They're just a number of credits that basically certain industries that are especially energy intensive have to purchase. So a completely different market. Now, technically this sounds very promising, but forest owners have a really hard time getting access to this market. This is just supposed to give you an idea of what it looks like to get certified to actually sell a carbon credit. So as a forest owner, I can't just go and say, I have a tree, please give me money for this tree. I need to go through an entire certification process that can take a long time and thereby incur a lot of fees. So about 200,000 euros is the amount of money I would need. And I would need to upfront invest this because the certification process can take about 2 years until it's completed, until I get the first money back. And this is something that really is ill-matching with the way forest ownership is structured, especially in European countries, because it's very fragmented. So we have a huge long tail of tiny forest owners who have maybe 1 hectare or 2 hectares that are managing. And so obviously they can't pay this amount of money and they just don't really have access to even start this kind of project. And the third part, this is something that we, with our idea of doing forest adaptation projects, happen upon, is the problem that we don't have a methodology to quantify what do these forest adaptation measures actually provide in terms of additional carbon storage. So we already had the project types of afforestation where you plant a forest where there wasn't one before, or forest protection, so you're preventing people from cutting down the forest. But kind of this in-between path where we're restructuring an existing forest didn't really have a carbon quantification methodology yet on the globe. So this is where we came in and had to actually create that methodology. Now, unsurprisingly, we're here to solve some of these problems, and our goal is to provide high-quality carbon credits to save European forests from climate change and really make them future-proof through the idea of diversification. Now, that sounds great. What does that mean more in detail? So just to give you a high-level overview of who we work with, we have a two-sided business model. So we work with forest owners on the one hand side, and we work with carbon credit buyers on the other hand side. Forest owners could be basically anybody. Right now we're focused on larger private forest owners in Germany, but we want to expand to smaller ones, different types of ownership, and also different geographies within Europe. And on the carbon buyer side, it can be small, medium-sized companies, it can be larger international corporates. We've contracted both types of or sizes of these companies as well in Germany or actually internationally based, who are interested in purchasing carbon credits as part of their sustainability strategy. So just to give you an example, they might have a goal to be net zero by 2035. And they know that even though they're decarbonizing and they're doing well on that journey, they're still going to have remaining emissions where they need to cover this with carbon removals, and they want to invest now to make sure they actually have that supply when they need it. Now, in between is actually where our main job is happening. So we're connecting these two entities, but we're not only connecting them, we're actually creating the carbon project in the process. Now, what does this mean? So since we are focused, and I talked about this a little bit already, on ecosystem restoration, we actually need to figure out what does the forest look like right now. So our process, just to walk you through it a little bit, is first to get data from the forest owner. So to figure out what is the status quo, what does this forest look like right now? Is it really 100% spruce? Are there some other tree species? How tall are they? What age do they have? How are they spread out in the area? We need to know all of this as a data basis to really make sure we're only selling the additional carbon credits that are created in the project. Now, the second step is to get the data that we get from the forest owner into a kind of workable format. So sometimes in, let's say, the best case, they're sending us access to a database. The worst case, they're sending us a picture of a PDF page. So very undigital. So we need to put this into a form that our software can actually work with. Now, once we have that, and what does digital twin mean? It basically means you have one line for each tree in this forest area. So you have millions of lines in this database. And for each tree, you have basically where is it based, what kind of tree species is it, the age, and so forth. So all of the parameters that define this tree. Now, in the third step, we do a simulation. And this is really the core of our technology and why we're a climate tech company. And what we do here is we do two projections. One, assuming that the forest owner will keep doing what he or she is doing. So managing a monoculture. And the second scenario, the one that we are trying to get him or her to do, so the one that we're financing, the forest adaptation scenario. And the reason we're doing this is because we are only allowed to sell, or we should only sell, and we do, the additional carbon storage that's provided in this project. So one of the core important quality criteria of a carbon project is that you only sell what comes on top of the business as usual case. Because if we think about it, the climate doesn't really care about the forest that's already there. It's really important that we move the needle to new projects, new actions that would not have happened otherwise. So this is always one of the most important things. How do you set your baseline, your business as usual scenario, and how do you define what happens in the project? And so that's why you can see here there's two lines, and the green part is what happens through forest adaptation and what the forest owner is rewarded for, essentially. So that's just to give you a basic idea of how we work with data. Now, more concretely, what do we have going on right now? So we have 3 projects that are already live. We just closed more contracts, so we are now on 2,000 hectares in Germany, which is already a good starting point. But if we set it into context, we have 3 million hectares of monocultures that need to be restructured. So there's definitely, a lot of room to expand, and we're not going to run out of projects very soon. These projects that we have, you can see there are 2 in Brandenburg, so in the area around Berlin. Why is this? This is because there's also an area which is specifically challenged by climate change, more so than, for example, Bavaria. So there are some areas where you just have advantages geographically, where climate change hasn't had as much pressure yet. Might change in the future. But that's also how we're trying to prioritize our pipeline to where projects are most urgently needed. All right, and here's just some pictures. This is actually one of my colleagues in the white t-shirt here, one of the foresters who works on the site, which I think is a great advantage for us. We can just, go to the projects in person, check them out, see what's happening. We have a good working relationship, a partnership with the forest owners and the people who work on the area. And I think this is a big difference to international projects where, I can't just fly to Malaysia all the time and check out the project. So this is something that I personally feel very comfortable with, that we have this personal connection to them as well. Because we are actually setting up 30-year contracts with these forest owners to make these measures come into reality, because forests don't do things very quickly where we're based. So that's why you need a very long timeline of these projects to actually make forest adaptation a reality. Now, zooming out a little bit, I wanted to take a minute or two to talk more about the investment case of carbon removals. So basically, why should companies care? Right? So this is where the money is coming from to input into the forest projects. why should companies care about spending this money in what is called a voluntary system? So I touched on this a little bit in the introduction, but basically we committed under the Paris Agreement to a net zero goal until 2050, which to me is starting to feel like it's not very far in the future. I don't know what you feel about this, but it's getting, surprisingly close. And that's also what we're seeing with companies. They're starting to think about, some of them have set themselves earlier goals. So maybe they have a net zero goal of 2035, which they're really thinking about, how can we reach this? What is our actual measurement plan? How can we decarbonize and how can we invest in carbon removals to really reach this net zero goal that we've set? And as mentioned already, there's always this kind of topic of what's the place of a carbon credit? And I think it's great to see also with data that the investment in these projects can actually have a correlation with companies decarbonizing. So it's not just a way that they're buying themselves out, but the investments in project, especially in Europe, is actually quite pricey. So a great way that a company can find a budget within this is if they price their carbon internally. So if you have an internal carbon price, so kind of an internal tax on carbon, that's a great way that we've seen some of the more leading companies actually set up a climate budget that they then reinvest in projects as well. Now, going from the need to have carbon removals until, latest 2050, but probably a bit earlier for some companies, where are we at right now? So the IPCC estimates that we need 10 gigatons of carbon removals annually by 2050. And right now we are at 0.003 gigatons. So this is obviously crazy far away from where we need to be or where we need to get to. And this is also what's pushing companies to invest earlier because they're aware of this fact, at least the ones who are really, intensely trying to figure out how to reach their climate goals that they've set for themselves. They know of this shortage, so they know that they need to save the supply for themselves if they want to reach their net zero goals. And this is actually a great, catalyst for companies like Pina Earth, because it's really pushing the interest of companies to invest in these types of projects and basically help scale up forest adaptation together with us. Now, where do we want to go? We want to be the #1 platform for nature-based carbon projects to save forests from climate change. Now, why did we say nature-based here? So we want to expand from forest adaptation, which we're starting with, and we're really laser focused on right now, to other types of forest carbon projects. So afforestation, reforestation, there are a lot of different, also kind of more specific things you can do in the measures that will basically change the carbon project. And as mentioned also, we want to expand from Germany to other EU countries because the situation is very similar, sometimes even worse in countries that are, have a drier climate, like Spain or Portugal, for example. We're getting a lot of inbound interest from forest owners as well, who are asking when they can start, in their geographies. So that's good to see. And we're not doing this alone anymore. So I will tell you a bit more about how we got to this point. But we were able to raise a seed funding round of 2.5 million last year, which gave us really great capital to get started on our journey. It's not just me and my co-founder anymore, which is a great starting point. But now we're close to 20 people in the team. We have signed contracts with customers on both sides, so forest owners and carbon credit buyers, and we're hoping to kind of take this momentum also into the next year. Now, how did we get here? So a bit of, I would say also a mix of story and unsolicited advice. So it's really very much take it or leave it. You can just listen to what I say and you can make up your own mind about it. But I always try to ask myself, what should I do with the 80,000 hours that I have in a career? Or basically, I think it's if you make it to 80 years old, you have approximately 80,000 hours to spend on your career. And for me, I always wanted to spend it on something where, you're always to some degree working towards a goal. So for me, this used to be getting a doctorate degree. Now it's making Pina, bigger, have a bigger impact. But I think you should always be working on something where you feel like even if you don't reach that goal, the ultimate end goal, you still don't regret the days that you spend working on this project. So this is always something that I tried to ask myself, periodically during my PhD as well. Would I regret the time I invested in this if I don't make it to this degree? No, I wouldn't. I was working with such great people and getting so inspired every day and making, the individual projects I was working on really helped me focus what I wanted to focus on. And so for me, that was always kind of my internal check if I'm on the right track. Now, some advice, not just from me, but from other people who have something to say on the topic. So this is a great environmental lawyer and activist, and I really liked the statement because to me, it's really about breaking down these barriers between these different sort of areas you somehow have siloed off in your life, or maybe some people have siloed off. So, what am I doing in my professional career? What am I doing in my personal, more lifestyle choices? What am I doing in my political choices? And the idea is to really try to align this. So to do kind of an audit across these different areas of your life and make sure that these are actually aligned with your values. And there's really nothing more that you spend more time on at a certain point in your life, probably, than your career. So this has an overproportional impact to what you spend your lifetime on. So I just wanted to call this a little bit into mind again. And I think that can really mean different things. And I would really try to encourage you to first think about a problem that you care about. And this is something that also, if you're thinking about starting a startup, you should always try to find a real problem. So not making up something that you think is real, but a problem you care about. And I think this is, to me, much more a gut decision than a rational decision. So I was also never somebody who had an Excel spreadsheet for different, life versions and trying to weigh pros and cons. I think for me, it was much more a gut decision. Where do I care about the problem? So I care about forests. I also care about other topics, but it's something where you really feel you get emotional also a little bit. And I think this can help you if you go through tough times, which if you found a startup, you most certainly will have tough times. And it really helps you get up again. So if you get, 1 week you have 20 customers or investors say no to you, they just say, no, I'm not interested. I don't care. I'm not going to invest. That really helps you if you just care about the problem and you say, okay, I'm just going to try it again. And of course, startups are not the only path. So I think this is something that is very trend-based. Startups are also a bit of a trend right now. It used to be more consulting, what people maybe went into, or banking. But I would like to encourage you to think about kind of the broad range of options you have. So you can go into or stay in academia if you're already in academia. You can go into a corporate and try to, innovate from kind of an entrepreneurship perspective. You can work for a nonprofit, go into politics. Please, some people go into politics. Great. Can found a startup. So just, different paths that you can take, and one is not necessarily better than the other, of course. And I think this is one of the most important things for me. Try to surround yourself with people that are mission aligned with you and value aligned, and where you really feel you can learn from them. So people are obviously very multifaceted, and you're probably not going to love every aspect of the people around you, but make sure there's at least one or two things where you feel like, okay, this person really got it figured out in that certain area. Maybe they're, really have a high emotional intelligence, for example, and you can learn from them in that sense. Or they're super analytical. And that's something that I also try to keep in mind when now building up the Pina Earth team, to have people where I feel like I can learn from in different aspects. And that really, there's a saying that you're the sum of the 7 people you spend most time with. And for me, those 7 people are definitely coworkers. So it's really important to make sure that you spend time with people that, get you also in the next step on a personal level. Now, in the very beginning, as Christoph mentioned, I was at CDTM, the Center for Digital Technology and Management. And as you also rightly identified, I was always very interested in interdisciplinary settings. So this is something that already came up in my study program at TUM, Sustainable Resource Management. Because it's a non-consecutive master, you can study it basically on top of anything you want. There's some requirements. And it was very international, and I really loved the atmosphere there. You had so many different perspectives, and just really great ideas came out of it. And so I wanted to continue that, and that's why I started at CDTM. And the idea there is to bring together people from different disciplines with a focus on technology and management. So those are kind of the focal points. That's where I met my co-founders as well. And in the beginning, this is basically all you have. So you really have nothing except people who, for whatever reason, committed to spending time with you on this project, right? And it starts to feel kind of crazy because you're basically making up this company that didn't exist before. For a while, at least a couple of months, you probably will have not even anything in writing. It's just, you just decided you're going to meet every day in this room and try to figure it out. And that's basically the start. And somehow through different circles, we can go into the discussion a bit more if you're interested. It ended up with Pina Earth. But for us, the idea process, this is something where I want to try to get a bit of, let's say, ideas that people sometimes have out of the room. Because it's not necessarily that you have this eureka moment and you wake up and you think, I'm going to do forest carbon projects, focus on forest adaptation. Like, this is not at all what happened to us. We just knew that we wanted to go into the founding journey. And so 2 months ago is actually not accurate, so go a lot back in time. We started brainstorming on different topics. And this is actually a screenshot from I think it was a Miro board that we used for different areas. And we had, I think, 150 different problems that we thought were interesting, very diverse. So you can see some examples here. So for example, we thought, why is it so hard to find a midwife in Germany? This seems like an annoying problem and an unnecessary one to have. Can we somehow solve this? I personally was always very surprised how little our education system teaches us about personal finance. You go through this entire process and you still have no idea how to manage your personal finances, which is a hugely important topic in a person's life. And so we thought maybe we can do a green neobank for young people like tomorrow, but with a focus on teaching you healthy financial habits. So just some examples. You can see the range was really diverse. And then we tried to put on a sort of investor lens and try to evaluate these different problems or idea fields. So what's the market potential? Try to validate the pain points with interviews. So for example, we talk to people who are already parents or are becoming parents about the midwife problem, because none of us had kids yet. So we didn't have information firsthand to make sure that this is actually a real problem and we didn't just make it up. And finally, really important for me, I already talked about this, is your motivation, which is mostly a gut feeling answer. Do you care about this problem? There are a lot of cool entrepreneurial trends going on where you could potentially build up a business that I just personally don't really care about. So I'm probably going to run out of energy trying to pursue this specific problem.
Gesa,
yeah.
should come to
Yes, I think it's the second to last slide.
Okay.
And so finally, we decided to focus on a problem that combines impact, business model, and also our personal skill set. And I think this summarizes it pretty well. So it's not really that people, I think, buy what we do. It's rather why we do it. So we're in an enterprise sales context. And I think what's important to know there is you're really dealing with people all the time. And they can really see that. They can see why you're working on this. And this is also part of what you build around the company. So I'll just stop here. And thank you so much for your attention so far. Happy for any questions you might have.